What is up, and welcome back to another episode, live recording of the Boss Life with Bonds. Today's episode has me trembling. My heart rate is elevated. Breathing is, I need lots of deep breaths. This topic hits so close to home. This wasn't what I planned on talking about this week at all. Um, I'm just going to dive right in. I have pages of notes. I know that this is going to be a series, so there will probably be more than one episode, hence part one. I haven't been this nervous to do my own podcast or to speak my own truth since last December when I was delivering a speech called Put Me In, Coach. Or I think it was called the Wake Up Call. And then I changed it to Put Me In, Coach. That speech won me those 2 trophies here for the International Speech Contest. I opened that speech by saying, I remember when I got the call from God, that this is what my life's work and path would look like. And I opened the speech up by explaining that the vision, if you will, or the call that I got from God, or when I felt it in my heart that this was where He wanted me to speak about, and this was how He wanted me to use my gift. I opened up by saying that I got that call when I was studying American history. And I remember we were in the colonial period, and I looked and I'm daydreaming. You guys know me. And I'm like, well, gee, I wonder what I would have been doing back then had I got I'm so emotional right now. I don't know why. Lord, give me the strength. I opened the speech saying, I remember the call. I remember opening up the history books. I was in college and I was going through the colonial period thinking, what would I have done had I been around back then? And it was loud and clear, like, Bonnie, you would have been a slave. And I was like, oh, that's right. And I remember when I said that, just seeing the faces of my friends that kind of were like, I've never thought about that. And it's like, yeah, that was the point of the entire speech, is that you've never thought about it like that. You've never positioned it in a way that was different from your lens. And I've been talking a lot about trauma and about healing. And I use the term, I talk about how we all experience life through our own lens. Your personality is created essentially from your experiences. And this is how you interpret reality. This is how you view reality. And we all have our own lenses. That's how you get your biases. That's how your subconscious brain kind of like helps you function faster, so that you can remember, oh, this is what this means, this is what that means, without having to stop and think about everything. So that's why it's probably so easy for some of my friends, and I say that with as much compassion and love as possible, some of my friends, to be able to see stuff that can be racially charged or divisive, and because of their past experiences, be very quick to put it in the file of those people are overzealous. Put it in the file of, oh, well, they're BLM, they're really loud, and they don't operate off of facts, or they are liberals, so nothing that they say can be unbiased. And so this episode today is my best effort to get my words together, collect my emotions together, and to be able to talk about and have these tough conversations that need to happen. Oftentimes, as a Black woman, when we try to, well, me specifically, I can only speak for myself, when I try to talk about things like this to people, whether it's on a podcast, on a social media post, whatever, I'm often met with, well, why does everything have to come back to race? And it's like, this isn't everything. This is something that is about race. So we can pretend if you want to, that's fine. But what I'm hearing when that's the response that a friend gives me when I'm talking about something that I've experienced is, this makes me uncomfortable, Bonnie, and I'm not emotionally prepared to have this conversation. So it's easily to divert to, this is drama, or why do you guys always talk about race? Well, let's, if you will, pretend that we are a community, the human race. Let's, if you will, pretend that we are a family. And with that said, or a relationship, we don't even have to be family. We're in a relationship. We are in a friendship, right? And in relationships, when the other person has a concern that they don't bring to the surface, what usually happens? The frustration that bubbles underneath the surface has so much anger and it's just waiting for a moment to blow up, right? Right? You can relate, whether it's with your kids, with your husband, your wife. If you don't speak about the issues that you have in your relationship, they bubble up at the most inopportune times. That's human behavior. If you don't talk about what's bothering you, it's going to come up eventually. So here is a new perspective for you to try on for my friends that don't understand where we're coming from right now. When you have been silenced, not given the proper platform, not given the same opportunities to express yourself, I had to pause there because I immediately thought about how if I had been born in the 60s or been alive in the 60s or 70s, I most definitely would have gotten hosed down or had dogs released on me or been jailed because of me expressing my dissatisfaction with the way our country was treating my people then. So that's what happened when we do voice our concerns. So if you can, for those of you that don't understand, can you view it through that lens? My friend Bonnie is a little hurt right now by the responses to this video. My friend Bonnie, her mother, her grandmother, her great grandmother, her great great grandmother, they didn't have the same experiences, opportunities, and outlets. And women especially, women, my white women, you got to understand because you know the feminine plight is pretty close, right? We're pretty neck and neck fighting for rights still. So it just blows my mind when my female friends, even my white ones, have a hard time seeing this through my perspective. But what I think is happening more so than anything is it's not that they can't see it, it's that they don't want to. So, my first point that I wanted to make was that these conversations have to happen because when we don't talk about them, that's where the frustration bubbles up underneath the surface. You don't understand why people riot? Well, I just explained why, and I hope that you can understand that. Because if so, I don't know how else to break it down to you. Think of this like family drama that doesn't get reconciled. It doesn't just go away. If there was a molester in the family who molested a child and you guys just don't talk about it, well, does that mean that the child that experienced that shouldn't talk about their experience with the molester because your sister didn't go through that? So, hey, I just don't see it that way. That's what you guys are saying to me. And all my friends and all my family members and all of your other friends that are of color when we come forward and we're like, hey, this doesn't sit well with us. You are essentially like telling the molested child in the family, don't talk about that. Stop. I didn't experience that. So why is it a big deal to you? Like that's what you guys are saying. I need you to sit with me for a moment and just process that. That's what you're doing. That was a crude example, but it's like I don't know how else to get through. I do know how to get through. Facts. Because facts don't have feelings. And whenever we try to express things, because it is so emotionally charged, and you can see that I have to keep pausing to compose myself so I don't yell, so I don't burst out into tears, so I don't go into like bonds mode, like, what the fuck is wrong? How, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so this is me composing myself. And I know for my friends, especially my conservative friends, like they don't want to hear about how this affected you emotionally or compassion. This is not, where are the facts? Okay, so here are the facts. I looked up on Reuters today, not Fox, not NS or not NBC, not CNN, but I looked at some of the things that are happening right now that are an attempt to perpetuate this high level of ignorance that is prevalent, ignorance amongst Black history, right, or the African American experience, or the American experience outside of being a white American. Like there's a lot of ignorance there. And if you are offended with the word ignorant, I don't know, make up a new word that means you are unaware because I know that that word can trigger people. Okay. So, what we have going on down here, as far as what's being taught in schools about Black history, is a suppression of data or a twisting of history. One of the statements that has been brought to the light and has been amplified was that let me read it so you know verbatim. I think, where's the statement? Where's the one? Ah, I lost it because I wanted to quote it verbatim, but it said, instruction includes how slaves develop skills, which in some cases could be applied for their personal benefit. The defense to that statement was the the children in Florida schools deserve to know how we Black people took advantage of our circumstances and that we weren't just victims and that we learned skills. That's a really pretty way to paint a picture on, life gave them lemons and they made lemonade. It's also a very insensitive topic because if I were to take we're not even gonna go there yet. That was some bullshit. Like, there's no way for me to make that sound pretty and sugarcoated. Like, that was some bullshit. They weren't just victims. They learned skills. Those skills are called survival. I've learned some survival skills too, growing up in predominantly white neighborhoods. Would you like to hear them? I'm gonna list them. I learned to speak well and properly so that I could be respected and not one of those, how they would view all the like Black kids in class. They assume they're going to be the troublemaker. They assume they're going to be behind in education. So my grandmother told me I had to be smarter than every white kid in the class because they expect me to not be. So survival skills. Yes, I learned how to speak eloquently and I learned how to be smart and work very, very hard. But I also learned how not to speak about my views so that I didn't ruffle feathers and that I didn't make them uncomfortable. Despite living in communities and environments where we were always uncomfortable, I couldn't make them uncomfortable. That's a problem. So that's a survival skill I learned too. I learned to use I learned to go by Bonnie Patterson as opposed to what my legal name is, Siobhan Williams. You can see how Bonnie Patterson might be more appealing on an application. If you don't believe me, I remember when my sister would go for jobs as Nina Patterson and she'd show up and they'd be like, "You're Nina Patterson?" Like so we learned how to name our children names that wouldn't get them, put their applications on the bottom of the bin, right? I learned to wear extensions and straight hair so that I could be more appealing since I lived in predominantly like white areas, because as you can see, Black women that wore their hair out natural had to deal with a lot of pushback and, oh, this is distracting or it's not professional. Yeah, I was like, we're going to bypass all that survival skills that I learned. And I learned to, just blend in, look like them so that you can fly under the radar. So this is what they're going to be teaching our kids in school, how the slaves, like despite being ripped away from their homes, put on a slave ship, chained down on a boat, splashing around in their own shit and feces and vomit for months. Some of them jumping off of the boat knowing they would die just so they didn't have to live that life, and being separated from their kids. And if you didn't produce enough crops, you got beat. And if you're a woman, you got beat with your shirt off so you could be further humiliated. But nonetheless, they learned skills. That's what they're going to be teaching in our schools. So it's going to continue to perpetuate this idea that so many of my friends have, where it's like, guys, was it really that bad? Or, whatever. You see where I'm going with this. So, yeah, that's called survival skills. I went to NPR as well, another trusted website. Reuters and NPR is where you can go to get news that won't be heavily saturated by a conservative or liberal agenda. Reuters is spelled Rueters, and NPR. Another thing that I found that's going to be coming up in the new education in Florida is that although it talks about people, the same four people basically, Martin Luther King Jr., Zora Neale Hurston, Maya Angelou, right? It talks about their great accomplishments, but it doesn't talk about the hardships that they went through. That's a big part of the Black history. And The reason why this is so problematic is because when we come forward to speak on topics like this, and these children and some of them adults haven't been educated on these things, they really are looking at us like, why are they so angry? What's the problem? We freed the slaves, affirmative action. And it's like, so talking about people like Maya Angelou and Martin Luther King and Zora Neale Hurston without talking about what they had to overcome to be great is extremely problematic and part of the reason why I have to do episodes like this in 2023. One of my favorites, one of my most disturbing favorite article pieces that I found today while I was researching to prepare for this podcast was about where did it go? Uh oh, did I close that tab off? It was talking about how here's a good example. I live in Florida. The 1920 Ocoee massacre. That was a this, if you're not familiar with this, because of course they don't teach this stuff in schools. Basically, what happened was the blacks wanted to vote. We were organizing like never before, workshops and churches, this and that. The KKK was definitely an intimidating factor trying to suppress the vote, but we still went up. But guess what was also happening before they slaughtered my people trying to vote? White leaders deterred black voters with poll taxes, right? So now you got to pay to vote, and then voter qualification tests that had questions on it, like how many bubbles are in the bar of soap. That question, that right there, like just sent me because if you guys don't take time to learn about some of the just disgusting ways that we were manipulated, even if it wasn't just like this was a regular thing, right? Like being made to gaslighting, made to feel like you're fucking crazy. Who the fuck knows how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? And what does that have to do with me being able to vote? I digress. For those of you that don't know, some of the people, what is this? They so, a white mob went looking for somebody. They found him in his home, drove him to Orlando and lynched him. They killed dozens of black citizens that night, burning their homes and two churches. Those who survived, almost the entire black population, fled the town of Ocoee and never came back. So these are some stories in black history that don't get told. And this is why education is so important, right? And this is, I have religion in today's title because if I have enough time and if I have enough energy, I'm going to touch on this. But education is necessary, one, but when the people who are creating the curriculum can rewrite it in any way that benefits them, it doesn't help anybody. And what does that have to do with religion? Well, my like personal plight is on female leadership, and how we were in the Bible like made to be. Oh God, I could go off on a tangent on that. But my big thing is that out of the Old and the whole New Testament, thousands of years of human existence, only 9 women were considered to be prophetesses or holy enough to speak to God. And out of those 9, 5 of them, I think 4 of them were virgins or something. So essentially, women had to be perfect to talk to God. Meanwhile, men couldn't, or men could, they could kill men in war. They could, sleep with people. They could have brothels and harems of like 500 plus women. But women, if we wanted to talk to God, we had to be sparkly, clean, never been touched. And if you all think for 1 second that I'm signing up for that and continuing to believe on that as the doctrine of the Almighty God and that it's without error and that no man added, removed, or worded things in a way that would benefit them, you're out of your fucking mind. Anywho, I digress. This is why it's so important to realize that one, education about your history is important. But if the people writing the education or writing the doctrine or writing the documents get to twist it however they want, that's also a problem. And I think that we're all acting like that's not a possibility when it very much is. Anywho, let's get back to the show notes. My third point was that education is key to understanding the plight so that we don't repeat history. So I made a post, and it was actually inspired by a friend of mine that I met at The Blocks, which was the reality TV show that I got to compete on this June. It'll be aired probably in January sometime because they're airing season 6 right now. I was in season 10, so yeah, probably won't be till January. Anywho, met a wonderful community of entrepreneurs. And one of the girls, I don't remember what her original post said, but she basically was saying, like, I don't understand the issue with it. But she also wasn't saying, like, I'm not open to it. And so a couple friends, we came in and we gave our points of view. And she's like, oh, I literally had no idea. Cool beans. Thanks for telling me. We had a cool conversation in the DMs and we're still conversing. And it was great. It was like, that's how these conversations are supposed to go. But unfortunately, that's so I took that same I took my response to her, which was, here's my question. If you would you feel comfortable watching that video with me and my kids and my family? Why or why not? And the purpose of this was, one, for me to see who really still doesn't understand it, and then also give my friends some space to, like, I wanted to see who would DM me and actually say, Bonnie, I don't understand this. And no, I don't want to do this publicly. But instead, what I got was a bunch of people who, well, not a bunch, a few people who are very adamant and proud to boast that they didn't see a problem with it. The very first comment that got posted got immediately deleted. And I don't know if it's because she knew that, like, my community would probably come for her ass. Ew, that sounds so gross. I don't know if that's what she deleted it for, or maybe she thought about it and was like, oh, that's actually kind of insensitive. That's my old programming as a woman in the South. Let me look at it through my friend's lens, like she's saying. Or maybe she went and Googled it and was like, oh, snap, I can see. I don't know why she deleted it. I have no idea. But it basically said, I watched the video. I took from it what I did. You took from it what you did. It is what it is, or something like that. And I remember just looking at that comment, and I know this person's heart, and I know how much inner work that they've been doing since we met each other. They've been through my Boss Life Blueprint courses. Like, I know where her conditioning is as a woman, a white woman of color. Did I say white woman of color? A white woman, blonde hair, beautiful. Like, I'm not saying that her life was easy, because her life was not easy. But I'm just saying, like, we come from two different worlds, and so she has had to ask things from me before, like, why is that a problem, Bonnie? And we've had these conversations, but she deleted her comment, and I have no idea why. But after that, um, let me just read what got me worked up this morning, why I had to make a podcast on it, and why I can't go back to those comments, because I'll fly off the handle. Her comment was, I took from it what I wanted to, and apparently you did too, something like that. I've seen a couple friends basically say, like, you're reaching, like, oh, is that site, the lynching site, it was like two lynchings, I believe. Is that common knowledge that it was the site of a lynching? And to that, I made a whole post on it, was like, hey, you know what? Let me go film a video, right? And any military base or any site where a battle was fought for American freedom, let me go stand there, drop a flag on the ground, and talk about, like, whatever. I don't know what the song's about. Let me do that, and then be like, try that shit in the hood, like, I wouldn't have to do the flag. I wouldn't have to do try that shit in the hood. Just filming the video at a site that is so sacred, because Americans are so patriotic, but only selectively. I made up a new term this morning, or maybe it's a term, but it's called selective patriotism, where you only give a fuck about America when it's painting your Lord, calm down, Bonnie. You said you weren't going to do that on this today. Selective patriotism, where you are patriotic when it serves you. Patriotic when it serves you. We only care about American history when it's, painting us in a good light. And that's where so many of my patriotic friends are. Another comment that just had me fly off the fucking handle this morning. My homegirl, love her to death. She said, this is just art. It's almost the same as if Little John or Travis Scott made a video like this. And I told myself I was not going to respond to comments this morning until 8 p.m. when I was done with work. But I couldn't resist. And I made a little video or comment. And I don't regret posting it, but I wish I had just saved it for this. And it was essentially, my response was this: there's no comparing those two. You cannot compare saying if Little John did a video like that. Well, first of all, he didn't. So let's just start there. Second of all, there's no comparison. There's no site that I can go to where blacks were hanging whites, right? And then make a video on it. Like where would that what are you talking about? Like that's not the history here. This is why history is so important. And I feel like she may not fully understand our history either. And this isn't a white person. This is a Hispanic female. So I that art and she grew up here in Florida as well with me. So I already know what kind of education she had on her history. I don't know if she knows about the Ocoee massacre or Rosewood even. I knew about Rosewood only because one of my classmates when I was at Brookshire Elementary School, he was an actor and he was one of the little kids in the movie Rosewood. And Rosewood's another story about in Florida where a white woman, the wife of a sheriff, he used to beat her. And instead of, she couldn't speak out and say it's my husband because he's the sheriff. So instead, she blamed a black dude. So they went on a freaking rampage, killing every black man and just destroying this all black town, only to find out it was a lie. Guys, stuff like this happened all of the time. And we're not talking 200-300 years ago. Like this was in the 1900s. And so when you can see it through that backdrop, I hope that you can kind of understand it a little bit better. So, anywho, it's not the same as Little John or Travis Scott making a rap song because, first of all, they didn't. This is not just art. And yes, art is freedom of expression, but there's also, I think I had to say this on somebody else's page. I was like, there's a difference between art, right? But I mean, art can also be trashy. Just because it's art doesn't mean that it's tasteful, right? Nudity can be a form of art too. And then like raunchy amateur porn, you're not going to say that's art too. No. So we have to stop like trying to manipulate facts so that they can prove our point. We don't get anywhere like that. So when you're going to make analogies, they got to kind of be like tick for tat. So when I made the analogy of let me go find a battle where white lives were lost, right? And then make a video talking recklessness, talking about don't try that in the hood. That's the best comparison we can get, but it's still not even coming close because we don't have any incidents where towns full of black people. Do you guys know what picnic stands for? Do you know that lynchings used to happen and white families had picnics while they were eating and watching a black person get hung? So we don't have the same playing field when it comes to going tit for tat on things like this. Were we completely innocent? Like, no, like please don't come for me. Like, I understand that I feel like all people can be racist, right? Or more, more so, I should use the term prejudiced, but there's no comparison there. We just don't have that. So that doesn't work well. What are some other ones that I've seen? It's just small town pride. I like that one the most because it came from small town people. This was on my friend's post. And those people, when I wrote my comment about, okay, well, when you grow up with the lens that you have on, whether that's the lens of a small town, whether that's the lens of being an evangelical, whether that's whatever the lens is, when you grow up with that lens, that's all that you understand and that's all that you know. So it's almost impossible for us to truly understand how something's going to affect somebody else when you're not bothering to trade lenses for a second and be like, ah. So my intention in doing this episode was to let you try on my lens for a moment so you can understand where we're coming from when we lash out and understand the level of restraint it's taking me right now to present this stuff in a calm, respectful manner, which is another reason why I'm so frustrated. I always got to be the bigger person. I always have to be eloquent. I always have to be calm because if I'm too angry, then I'm the angry black woman, even if the anger is justified. If I'm too emotional, we can't listen to anything that she's saying because she's just emotional. You know how women are. Or if I start using too much emotions, then it's like, oh, those liberals, I'm not a liberal, but when you are talking about stuff like LGBTQ and like, equity for black DEI, then you automatically are a liberal. So whatever. Whew. And then the last comment, hold on, let me go back to it's just small town pride. I can see how through that lens that's all that you know. But that's the benefit of being able to have these conversations with people that aren't from a small town. Hell, when I went to California, I was blown away at just how diverse and respectful the community was out there. Um, it was a beautiful experience and it just showed me like That's why I want to move to California so bad. Like I'm in a really rough place between wanting to stay here because this is my home state and fight the ignorance, but then also just wanting to pack the fuck up and go where people I don't have to explain these things to people. But that doesn't fix anything. So I guess my black ass is staying in Florida till further notice. Okay. The last one that I'll touch on is the I don't see the problem comment. I don't see the problem with that video. Well, here's my response to that. I don't see the problem with that. Just a few hundred years ago, your great 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 grandfather didn't see a problem owning my great 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 grandmother or splitting up her family or hanging them if they met, you know what I'm saying? Like they didn't see a problem with that. So when you come with the argument of I don't see a problem with that, that's extremely problematic because you are a descendant, right? And I know that let me connect some dots because when I use that example, people are like, "Oh my gosh, slavery is so long ago." But let's just go down the timeline. So 1863, slaves are free. We're really close to the 1900s, right? Okay, so their kids are still, doing the what was this? Where's the 1920, the lynching? Um, I need you guys to understand that these ideals don't just disappear overnight. Just because a political move was made to free the slaves didn't mean that it had any effect on the hearts and the ideals of the American people, right? So there's still so much like I can only imagine from a business perspective how annoying that must have been. Like you're making all this profit with free labor and now we don't get free labor. Fuck, right? So much aggression. So that's where the frustration comes from. But regardless, guys, you do know how the KKK started, right? You do understand that all of these things are very real. Do you think that because Martin Luther King had a dream, everyone just like took off their KKK robes and took all of their racist beliefs and all of their anger and just gave it to Jesus and now they just have open hearts and minds? No, they had to learn to stop talking about it because laws started getting made and you can't talk like that and this and that. So those same people, right? Your grandparents, a lot of you, raised you with certain beliefs and dispositions, whether they were spoken or shown. So while you may not want to hang me, if you were raised with only their ideals, I need you to like like I'm trying to find the words because it just blows my mind that this has to be broken down. These things are passed down. And the thing that I'm seeing is that it stops with my friends that are on my page like saying, "Hey, yeah, this isn't actually right after all." They're the ones that are saying, "Hey, you know what? This may have been the way it was before, but it's not right." And the fact that I have so many people who just this is another post I made, who can't put their pride, can't put their ego, can't put their traditions, and can't put their beliefs aside to see, hey, perhaps this was wrong. That's very problematic. And that's my issue with church, which I don't think we're going to have time to touch on that topic today. But I just it's so much. It's so much. And it's so hard for me to just like I don't even know. I gotta wrap this podcast up because I'm getting very emotional and frustrated again. And I got stuff to do today. But we're gonna pick back up on this. And on the second part two of this, I'm gonna be talking more about religion. Because this weekend I got the opportunity to have a very uncomfortable conversation with my mother, who is a reverend. And as you guys know, I'm also an ordained minister and I'm bisexual and I'm spiritual. I believe in God. I pray still, but I don't agree with the Bible anymore. I believe in all the wisdom that is in there, the stories, the truths, but there's some stuff in there or stuff that's not in there, traditions, right, that have caused a lot of harm. And the same thing there is the same thing that I'm going to talk about here is just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's right. And I think that's where I'll close. Just because this is the way that you view things doesn't mean that it's okay. That's all I have. So I will see you guys next time, possibly Wednesday. Wednesday is my self proclaimed Bonnie day. So I don't know if I'll be talking about heated topics like this on my Bonnie day, but we will be picking up on part two. Thank you so much for tuning in and having this conversation. If you feel like this podcast was valuable, or you know someone that needs to hear this, this is being streamed live right now on YouTube. So you can head over to YouTube and follow or find me, Siobhan Bonnie Patterson. It's also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so you can check that out there and you can share that message there. If you came in late, I definitely feel like you may want to go back and listen to the very beginning, especially the opening part of this podcast. And for any of my friends that I have popped off on in the comments, or that just watch this in general, I would love to have conversations with you about this either in person or in the DMs and not on social media where we have to like put up this persona. Oh snap, I had a quote I wanted to finish with. I'm so extra. um Dang it, I'm using all of my devices so I can't pull up the quote, but essentially it was this. One of my friends, he said he grew up in a town of like 98 people. He lives in, it's either Minnesota or Wisconsin, right? So obviously not a very high Black population there. But he's made it his business to educate himself on things that he was unaware of. And he said that when it comes to stuff like this, when he choose, like there's no way that he could choose his comfort and clinging to basking in his ignorance when it comes to issues like this. When you don't want to hear other perspectives, you are choosing to bask in your own ignorance for your own comfort. And that means that your comfort means more than our friendship. And for that reason, I'll also end on this. Relationships have conditions, adult relationships. And I know that sometimes when I'm going to try to find the actual quote that he said because he said it so much better than I did. I'm so sad. But when it comes to adult relationships and issues like this, I have been known, like, I have been instantly deleting, blocking, and removing people, and I was feeling bad because I was like, oh man, like I should talk about this. And oh man, I should, really, make this better for them or whatever. And what I'm learning is that relationships, adult relationships are conditional. And if needs aren't getting met, then you don't owe anyone to stay in that relationship. And as much as I want to continue to have great relationships with my friends that don't see the world the same way as me, one of my conditions is that in 2023, you get to hear what my Black experience is like because my whole life I've grown up viewing yours. I think that that's a fair condition, and if not, then, like, if that's too much for you, then we probably don't need to be like, there's not gonna be much of a relationship if you're not willing to see life through my lens when my entire experience has been, learning how to live in your world. Where was the filter? Let me bring that, or not filter, where was the quote? He said, "Jesus loves the children." Why? How did I lose that quote so fast? I'm so sad. "I prefer basking in my own ignorance to excuse my behavior to any amount of compassion. Preferring to bask in your own ignorance so that you don't have to show compassion." That's what the quote was, and that's what I've been getting a lot of. So, I'm gonna close out this podcast for real, for real. Please, go back to the beginning and check out the footage or the parts that you may have missed. I love you guys, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. There's a lot of people who just wanna be angry and don't wanna talk about stuff like this, but I feel like it is my duty to, as an educated Black woman, as someone who is eloquent, as someone who does have a way with words, I feel like it is my duty to, and someone that grew up around all Black white people. So I kind of like, I understand where you're all coming from, but it's literally just a limited lens. It's not that you're racist, but when you're not willing to accept that, hey, maybe my great great grandfather and the people that raised me, this shielding, this small town, this limited, narrow mindset is actually, not helpful in today's environment. If you're not willing to do that, I just don't see how we would have a great friendship. This isn't something like, oh, do you believe in GMOs or not? It's like, do you believe that the stories that I say are true? I'm out. Wait, I got to read these comments on Instagram because they go away. Facebook, I'm going to come back for those.